Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Air Force Association's annual Aerospace Cyber Conference and Trade Show just outside Washington, D.C., the #1 event for U.S. Air Force leaders from around the world, converging here outside the nation's capital on this, the 72nd anniversary of the United States Air Force. Our coverage here is sponsored by L3 Harris and Leonardo DRS, and it's our positive honor to be talking to the Acting Secretary of the United States Air Force, Matt Gorilla Donovan, who has the coolest call sign of anybody who's ever been Secretary. Sir, honor and pleasure. Happy birthday, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you, Vago.
Pleasure. So budget, look, on so many metrics, so much progress on innovation, the amount of change is palpable, and the direction, whether on the acquisition side of the house and the stuff Dr. Roper is working, including across all the commands. But let's talk about the budget at the end of the day, something that occupies a lot of your time and attention. How's this budget process going to go? There are folks who are concerned that there could be a shutdown at the end of the day over disagreements about border wall redirection, funding redirection that Secretary Esper signed. How do you think this process is going to go through, and how do you think it's going to go?
Well, the most important thing is that we get appropriations on time. Last year for the FY19 budget, we got the first on-time appropriation in many, many years, and it makes a difference for us, right? It makes it easier for us to execute the budget that we had planned, and it gives industry, it gives our people the budget certainty that's required. Now, that being said, we have spent many years starting out with a continuing resolution. And if that happens and it's only a short-term continuing resolution, then the impacts are minimal. And I'm hearing right now that there may be one that brings us up to the Thanksgiving break or something like that. So I think that's completely doable for us. The problem, what I've seen in the past and what we've seen in the past with continuing resolutions is that if you get up to that deadline and you're not quite ready to go, then they add another couple months onto it. And that's happened in the past where it happens 2 or 3 times. Now, once we get into about halfway through the budget year, because the rules of the continuing resolution is number 1, we can't start any new programs, and number 2, we have to execute at the level of the previous budget, which for us in the Department of Defense is $22 billion less. Then what happens is we get a big influx of money when an appropriation's finally passed, and then we're not able to execute all the dollars that have been given to us because it's so late in the year. And then it becomes a vicious cycle. We go back to Congress the next year, and they go, hey, you didn't execute the budget, so we're going to mark you down because of that. And it becomes a vicious cycle. So continuing resolutions are not good. Short-term, very short-term, a few weeks up to a couple months is fine.
Do you think that there could be a shutdown risk at the end of the day, especially over disagreement over the border wall funding issue and sort of the way the administration sort of couched it? There are some folks on the Hill who don't like that. Do you think there could be that prospect, and if so, do you need to start doing some planning and thinking about that now?
I think anything's possible, but from what I've seen from the leadership of both the House and the Senate is they want to avoid that. It was very damaging to us last year, even though they started the Defense Department up and the rest of the government stayed shut down. There's really nothing good that comes out of government shutdown. It ends up costing us more money than it ends up saving in the long run. So my hope is that they'll reach an agreement to at least continue funding the government, even if it's at a continuing resolution level.
Let me take you to the issue of the fiscal outlook. We heard Secretary Mark Esper, Defense Secretary Esper, talk a little bit about, look, there are challenges, we've got to do better. There's the fourth estate. What are the major muscle movements that the department can make in order to be able to change how it does business, to get more headroom in it? Ultimately, the Budget Control Act is going to expire soon. Where do you see the budget vector? Is this going to be something that's going to continue, steadily increasing? Do you see perhaps a sharp downturn because we've had many years of increase as folks start to focus, for example, on debt reduction? What's the sort of strategic thinking you guys have on when you start to peak and when you start to decline?
Well, first off, we're very grateful for Congress passing the final bipartisan budget act that now closes out the Budget Control Act, which removes that specter of sequestration from over our heads. So we're very grateful for that. I think, as Secretary Esper said this morning, I think we may have seen the peak of defense budgets for a while. In fact, the second year of the budget agreement for FY21 is a little bit of a downturn where it doesn't even keep up with inflation at the $740 billion level. So I think I would agree with Secretary Esper. And although there are those in the Congress who think that we should still continue with the 3 to 5% defense increase, and we'll see how that plays out. But I think as far as the defense-wide review, Secretary Esper has taken this very seriously. In fact, we all spend as service secretaries once a week going through the entire fourth estate right now at this time, and he's taken it very seriously. And he's also expressed the intent to, if he finds some savings there, he's going to execute those immediately, not just wait for the next budget. But as we've known before, we've gone through a lot of these. There's been a lot of scrubs of the fourth estate. The difference this time is we have a very clear national defense strategy that helps us prioritize what is important to meet the needs of that defense strategy and what may be less important. There are no unimportant programs, otherwise they would never have made it through the vetting to begin with. But there are priorities and relative value that we have to take a look at.
As you put your next budget together, what are some of the major muscle movements we're likely to see? You know, the chief has said this, you've intimated as much, to satisfy some of those priorities, to reduce some of those overhead, some of the tail parts to bolster the tooth. What are we going to see in the budget? You know, where are you going to take greater risk in terms of that fourth estate reduction? Where are you going to take some risk or find opportunity in where you're going to invest for the future?
Well, using that same framework of the National Defense Strategy, we've actually been doing zero-based budget reviews for the last 2 years, where we're taking a look at how do we align, how do our programs align with the imperatives of the National Defense Strategy. And so we've scrubbed that thoroughly now, and we used to, I would have to say that we thought that we aligned very well with the National Defense Strategy. But as we do more experimentation and war gaming and that sort of thing, we realize that we still have a ways to go. Last year, we, as part of one of 3 independent studies on the future inventory of the Air Force, we, through deep analysis, discovered that we're too small for what the nation needs the Air Force to do. But now we have some deep analysis behind that. That's how we arrived at the 386 squadron requirement. Now what we're looking at, and there's more report language in the FY20 SAS committee report that requires us to turn in a future design alternatives report for the Air Force that's due on March 1st of 2020. And now it's like, okay, we need to be bigger, but we also need to be better. So now we're taking a look at our concept of operations. Do we have those right? And what capabilities in the future will be required to meet the threat?
Let me take you to 2 quick questions. One is on Space Force. There's still a lot of debate. Obviously, Space Command is now back as a combatant command. What's the right way to do the formation of a Space Force at the end of the day that doesn't end up hurting the United States Air Force, that has been a steward of space and has been thinking about space and a leader in space since before space was actually a thing, a real thing? How do you do this, do it right, given that there are a lot of people who joined the Air Force to do space but wear the blue uniform?
Well, we spent a lot of time talking about the threat as it's developing from China, Russia, and other adversaries as space becomes more of a warfighting domain. So we spent a lot of time over with Congress and explaining the threat to them as well. So the 2 versions of the NDAA, from the House and from the Senate, both agree on 2 things. One is we've got to do something in a way of an organization that raises the level of effectiveness for fighting a war in space. And secondly, they both agree that it should remain in the Department of the Air Force in order to take advantage of the synergy and of the space professionals that, as you say, I am absolutely proud of the way the Air Force has been a steward of space, and we've done a lot of things. But a new Space Force as an independent service, I think will now unleash its full potential. And in order to do that, that's why I've been urging the Congress to make sure they provide the authorities with the Space Force as a separate service and by modifying Title 10 of U.S. Code.
Last question. I know that 386, I mean, that's something that Secretary Wilson last year talked about. I think that anybody who knows air power knows how important it is to the fundamental ability of the nation to project power and fight anywhere and win anywhere, whether it's on the support side of things or on the combatant Air Force's side of things. But one of the things that the Air Force has done is you've got to match that to fiscal reality. And if we think the budget's going to go down, historically the Air Force has drastically cut people to free money for modernization. The trouble is it's ended up losing both the people and the modernization. How do you do, can you assure folks that option is not on the table? And if it is on the table, how do you get it right this time if you do have to trade people to protect some of these core key programs that are generational modernization efforts?
One of the things that we discovered is that, and in the past we've said that we need a minimum of 350,000 people, and that's just to fill the holes that we have. Now, that being said, we're going to continue on that climb, even in a declining budget environment that we're seeing as a potential. So I don't see us cutting back on manpower at all. We'll continue a positive climb towards that number. Now, at the same time, we have to take advantage of new technologies that may reduce the requirement for manpower. That doesn't mean that we will reduce the size of a force. That means that we'll repurpose them into more relevant capabilities.
Thanks very much. Acting Air Force Secretary Matt Gorilla Donovan, sir, thanks very much. Really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to talking to you. You're looking forward to, well, pending confirmation, right? Secretary Barrett joining you soon.
Right. Hopefully, I understand she was passed out of committee today and voted out of committee. So hopefully we'll get a vote soon and get her in the seat.
Outstanding, sir. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.